So now we're at session 3 in the discernment process, looking at relationships. And now we're looking at unhealthy traits in relationships. And I could just say the opposite of everything I said in the healthy relationship section, but I feel like I want to give a little bit more importance to this because some of this is not known initially at the beginning of the relationship. Sometimes you feel like you're with a completely different person and maybe you are a completely different person at the beginning of the relationship. And for whatever reason, and sometimes it's important to analyze this. If you look back at the timeline of your relationship, when did it start breaking down and why? Was it life stressors, having kids, having financial issues? Um, Maybe there was an incompatibility that started to show up. Maybe there's also a different way of living, like really different life values of saving money, spending, even the level of cleanliness in the house, organization. Maybe there isn't enough fun, there isn't enough moments of connection. Maybe you really don't know your partner and all of the ways that's important to them, of the things that they do or who's important to them in their social circle. What are they thinking about? What are they interested in? Sometimes we forget to stay up with our partners, and they have a whole different life that they're living that we know nothing about. Not that they're doing it on purpose, but we're just not interested. I feel like that's called bidding attention. Sometimes our communication is so unhealthy that we can't resolve things, that talking about hard things always ends up in a fight, that people avoid talking about things, or when people do talk about things, that they become very passive aggressive. They actually make the other person feel bad about bringing things up. They shut down, they withdraw, they punish. Um, there's also some times where people are jealous and possessive of the person, that the person feels like they don't have the independence they really need in life, and that um, they're being manipulated by that person with their needs. Then there's unmet needs that each party usually has, and that's a very normal thing. But sometimes the unmet needs really create a lot of conflict. Uh, and so, a therapist that's a well known therapist in the Bay Area, Terry Real, said, um, in order to have a healthy relationship, you have to accept the needs that are met in your relationship and grieve the needs that aren't, balancing out that the needs that are met are enough. They're enough to sustain you. And the ones that aren't being met, you might have to meet them in different ways. And that's being realistic. So, not being accountable to the things that aren't working for you in the relationship if you're the cause of them. Other things to think about is other stressors like money, intimacy, extended family, growing apart, basic incompatibility, like living very, very different paces of life. So that's when healthy is to understand that there are individuality in differences, and these unhealthy is the differences really impede on the connection. And then some of this turns into abuse, neglect, lack of consent, and violence can also be one of those non-negotiables in a relationship. So when you're noticing the unhealthy parts of your relationship, it can be overwhelming to talk about this. It could be like, okay, there's just no way. There's no way we can look at this discernment thing. These things are just um, unpermittable. But I want you to think about the top 5 for you that really trouble you in your relationship. And in a discernment process, you want to be able to approach these to see if there are ways to talk about them, or if they become sort of taboo topics. Then we know that this is the reason why we're in a discernment process, is to look at maybe we have crossed the mark of no return in the relationship, and that the strengths actually are not outweighing the weaknesses, and that's something to look at. So looking at unhealthy traits in relationship is critical. It's difficult, and sometimes the way that I work with that with a couple that's in high conflicts is I look at it in a caucus setting, which it means I meet with each person separately and come up with some conclusions that I might bring to the next session to just discuss together, because they're too difficult to actually figure out who's doing what. People get too defensive, and it creates sort of a lack of safety in the sessions and after the sessions. So discernment counseling is looking at, and a discernment process is looking at the things that are really tough to acknowledge that are going on into the relationship, and they may have been going on for a very long time. So um, let's take a look together on the unhealthy traits of the relationship, and match them up to the healthy traits of the relationship in our discernment process.